Well, folks, the situation in North Carolina continues to percolate. It is a horrifying situation over this just dramatically evil stabbing of Irina Zarutska. She, of course, is the Ukrainian refugee who's riding the light rail and was stabbed to death by a 14-time offender named DeCarlos Brown Jr., who had a significant mental disorder, violent schizophrenia. The reason that this continues to be in the news is not just because of all of the issues that you would expect, the media's willingness to ignore the actual story because, after all, the races don't match up with their preferred racial narrative. Not just because the footage is so horrifying, but there's another aspect of it that has now, I think, grabbed public attention. That is the horrifying tragedy of the fact that as this crime went down, nobody moved. If you go all the way back to 1964, there's a very famous case from Queens called the Kitty Genovese case. In that case, allegedly, there was a woman who was and murdered in a relatively crowded apartment complex. And supposedly, there were something like 38 people who heard what was going on, and none of them actually did anything. Now, as it turns out, there were some who sort of heard scuffling or heard yelling but didn't know what it was. There were some who tried to call the police, but there was no 911 system in place. That case was so horrifying to the nation because there was a full 30-minute period in which Kitty Genovese was being and then murdered that the entire nation was shocked, and there was all sorts of work that was done on how to make systems like the 911 system better, how to train people to overcome what's known as the bystander effect. The bystander effect is where there are a lot of people in a particular situation, something bad is happening, and everybody expects someone else to do something, and so nobody does anything. It's a collective action problem. Well, as it turns out, that collective action problem is not relegated to 1964, and in a world in which people have become more and more disconnected from one another, you are going to see more and more suffering. The tape that has now emerged of the actual slaying of Irina Zarutska is horrifying in the extreme. For 1 minute and 35 seconds after Irina Zarutska is stabbed in the neck, no one does anything. 1 minute and 35 seconds. And there are people around her. You can see from the original shot that was released to the public, from the light rail train, you can see that there are a bunch of people who are sitting nearby. There are at least 4 people who are sitting nearby during this particular stabbing. You can run the tape and you can see their reaction, which seems to be to go right back to looking at their phone. She, of course, begins to cry. One man stands up, seems a little bit surprised, and then just sort of walks forward. There are at least 4 other people who are sitting there doing literally nothing. One woman looks over at her, puts her backpack on, sort of moves away from her in the car. I know the temptation of some is going to be to say that that is a racial issue because the woman who is stabbed is white and the other members of the car are black. But this really doesn't have to do with race because it turns out that the first person to respond to her tragedy is a black man who comes over and brings a shirt and tries to stanch the bleeding. But the point is this. As human beings, we are utterly unprepared mentally, emotionally to deal with tragedy. I think we all ought to look into our own hearts and really determine whether we would be the person who stands up and does something, just as human beings. I think that there are kind of 2 things that needed to be done here. One, of course, would have been to tackle the assailant. Unless you are a true hero, a person who's trained for that, like Daniel Penny was on the New York subway, you probably won't do anything. And Daniel Penny, of course, was then run down by the police and fully prosecuted for the crime of defending the public. And let's be real. If this had been a Daniel Penny situation, and the criminal in this case, DeCarlos Brown, had gotten up, and before he had committed the stabbing, somebody had put him in a submission hold, and he had died, and the person who put him in the submission hold was white, that person would have ended up on trial. That is the way that our political justice system too often works. But then there's a second kind of intervention, and that is, are you going to step in and help someone when they are clearly suffering in front of you in a way that there is no avoiding? And the answer is, for an enormous number of Americans, no. That they will look the other way, awkwardly move out of the way, glance at their phone while a woman literally bleeds to death. And so I want to show you what is one of the most tragic minute and 35 seconds of tape I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just horrifying in the extreme. If you don't feel this at the deepest core of your being, then you're missing something inside. This 23-year-old woman who's coming home from a job at a pizzeria gets stabbed in the neck. You can see the look of horror on her face as it happens. She clearly doesn't feel the extent to which she's been stabbed, which is not surprising when people suffer grievous wounds very often. They immediately go into shock. The body reacts that way. And then you will see her slump over and fall to the floor and bleed out. Well, no one does anything for 1 minute and 35 seconds, which is the time it takes to die if somebody stabs you in the jugular vein. So between 1 and 2 minutes, you're going to bleed out. What needed to happen here is somebody, if there was any shot at saving her life at all, somebody needed to stand up, move over to her, and immediately put pressure on the wound. There was no attempt to do that whatsoever. And you can see as the floor is saturated with her blood. It is truly one of the most horrifying tapes I've ever seen in my entire life. So this is just a warning. This is very, very graphic footage. So if you wish to skip forward a few seconds, then you may want to do so because it is pretty horrifying. You've been warned. Here you can see him reach around, slash her jugular vein. And you can see that she doesn't even know what's happened. She puts her hand to her face, she begins crying. And no one does anything. You can see spatters of blood everywhere, blood on the knife. The murderer walking down the car. There are a bunch of people in this car. This is a very crowded car. And then she loses consciousness. She slumps over and she falls to the floor. And in this shot, the timer's now going. The timer's now going. Her life is running out in front of us on this tape. The timer is going. Her blood is on the seat. You can't see her because the view from this camera is obstructed by a sort of railing. But people are talking. Nothing is really happening. Nobody rushes over to check if she's okay. Again, her blood is visible on the seat. There are blood spatters on the floor. No one is moving. You can see her blood pouring down the step. You can see there's a man who's standing literally right there. He does not move to help her. He does not move to put pressure on the wound. He does not move to check if she is all right. Nothing. He stands there and he does nothing. And you see someone else get up and move away. You can see other people who are standing there with their backpacks, doing nothing, literally doing nothing. And you can see the floor continues to be saturated with her blood because she is dying right in front of all of these people. One man comes over wearing a Dallas Cowboys hat. He proceeds to point at this, point and do nothing, turn away. And then finally, after 1 minute and 35 seconds, a young black man comes over, moves in there and tries to actually do something about the situation. Now, it appears to be too late. He tries CPR. He clearly doesn't know what to do. I mean, he doesn't have medical training in any way, shape, or form. But the apparent indifference of the car, I mean, the amount of blood is astonishing, obviously, and horrifying. The just pure indifference by so many in the car to this happening right in front of them reminds us that human nature is not inherently good. You have to train yourself to act in emergency situations. You have to train yourself to act in the proper way. It's a call to everybody to do that, for sure. And it's a reminder that we have truly trained entire generations of people to do nothing in the face of absolute horror. Absolute horror. Unless you believe that this killing was not racially motivated, the tape aboard this light rail car shows the alleged perpetrator in this case, DeCarlos Brown, literally saying, "I got that white girl." Again, if the races were reversed, obviously, to go back to a point that everyone's been making over the course of the last 72 hours, if the races were reversed, this would be a national story. There would be rioting in the streets. If there had been a white man who stabbed to death a young black woman, caught on tape, a bunch of white people sitting around doing nothing until one white person intervenes 1 minute and 35 later, and the white person were walking around the car saying, "I got that black girl," we would be talking about the great racial reckoning. But of course, the media have no interest in that whatsoever at all. Here's the tape of DeCarlos Brown walking around talking about how he got that white girl. This, by the way, again, is very graphic footage. So again, if you wish to skip ahead, you have been warned. As he walks over, there's blood coming from his knife. This human piece of debris, this monster. You can see people turn their back, nobody doing anything. And again, it's not just black people ignoring this. There are white people on the car doing nothing. One man appears to turn around and then sort of move away from the situation. Again, everyone's moving very casually around the car. Horrifying in the extreme. Pam Bondi has announced federal murder charges against DeCarlos Brown Jr. She says Irina Zarudska was a young woman living the American dream. Her horrific murder is a direct result of failed soft-on-crime policies that put criminals before innocent people. I've directed my attorneys to federally prosecute Carlos Brown Jr., a repeat violent offender with a history of violent crime, for murder. We'll seek the maximum penalty for this unforgivable crime, and he will never again see the light of day as a free man. And of course, the system truly does need to be revised top to bottom here. Recidivism is the normal rule for criminals. This bizarre notion that keeping people in prison is somehow a detriment to society is a lie. It has always been a lie. It continues to be a lie today. 14 times this person was arrested, convicted, and then released. 14 separate times. This person was released on cashless bail, apparently. This person was allowed to wander the streets as a homeless, violent schizophrenic by the system, presumably in the name of civil rights. But as Matt Walsh has pointed out, my colleague, it turns out that one civil right is not being murdered aboard a train in cold blood. President Trump, for his part, he said that it's time for law and order, what he calls vicious law and order. He is not wrong about this.
She was slaughtered by a deranged monster who was roaming free after 14 prior arrests. We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand. 24 of the top 25 most dangerous cities in America are run by Democrat mayors. 50 people were murdered in Chicago in recent weeks, with hundreds being shot. And it's time to stop this madness. The people of our country need to insist on protection, safety, law, and order.
Now, again, this does not mean that the federal government has the power to overcome posse comitatus. You're not going to see the National Guard going in and literally arresting people for littering, jaywalking, or even crimes like rape or murder, because that's the job of the local government. However, the supplemental ability to put people on the streets to deter crime, the ability to enforce the law, the reality that we need a national campaign against the horrifyingly bad George Soros-type prosecutors who have dominated America's major cities, letting criminals out onto the streets to rape, murder, and loot at will in an enormous number of cities. That's what needs to be done. Caroline Leavitt from the White House, she quite properly pointed out that the media had ignored the killing, and we all know the reason why, because the media have a narrative about America. Their narrative is that America is a white supremacist country, that minority crime against white people is due to backlash to that white supremacist system or the shortcomings for minority people thanks to that white supremacist system, and that thus such crime must be ignored, that white on black crime is a reflection of the evils of white supremacy, i.e. the system, and that black on white crime is irrelevant. It is to be ignored because it might provide fodder to racists. Now, again, the low opinion you must hold Americans in to believe that if you see a black man kill a white woman, that you're immediately going to label all black people. That is not how Americans think. That is not how we were raised in my generation, and my parents' generation for that matter, to actually believe. I was raised, as were all of the people I know, by the Martin Luther King Jr. creed, to be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But the media doesn't think that. The media believes that certain murderers ought to be treated with kid gloves, and certain people ought to be treated with the full brunt and weight of the media, including police officers who actually have not committed similar crimes. I'm seeing people today compare this particular case and the tape from it to the George Floyd case. No, the George Floyd case involved a career criminal who was resisting arrest and died, in all likelihood, of excited delirium thanks to a radically enlarged heart and significant ingestion of drugs over the course of time, as well as excitement from arrest. That is not in any way similar to this case in which an innocent young woman was simply slaughtered for no reason by a homeless, schizophrenic, violent, evil person. In any case, here was Caroline Leavitt correctly pointing out the media's willingness to ignore this crime.
Perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer.
And she, of course, is totally right about that. She went on to rip a judicial system that allows monsters like this particular killer to roam free.
Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, who I will add was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Arena should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities.
That is absolutely true. It is absolutely true. Now, there's one further note here, a sort of cap, a poignant cap on this story. So Irina Zarutska's family was offered by the United States government to fly her body back home to be buried in Ukraine, this beautiful 23-year-old person. And her family said no. She would want to be buried in America because she loved America. Here is what members of the Trump administration had to say about this.
I hope the family won't mind me sharing, but after Irina's death, the embassy in Ukraine called and said, "We'll help you bring her home." And her family said no. They said she loved America. We're going to bury her here. So I think we can give her an America to be proud of. As Mr. Barnacle said, something here is broken, and we're here to fix it.
Okay, and here I would like to point out, there's been a lot of debate lately about what makes somebody an American. And the first and foremost characteristic is somebody who loves America, truly loves America. This is a person who escaped the Russian attack on Ukraine in 2022, who is a new resident of the United States, who presumably was in the process of getting citizenship, and who loved the country and believed in the country. And our systems of law failed her. Yes, America can take in good people. Yes, America should protect good and innocent people who wish to become part of the American dream. And yes, America failed this woman in a horrifying, horrifying way. And hopefully we can learn lessons on both a personal and a societal level to prevent something like this from ever happening again. It might take a while, but it should never happen again. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get into the latest economic news. It appears the economy may be on the ropes, may have been on the ropes actually in the last year of the Biden administration, as we all kind of felt and knew. Plus, Israel strikes Hamas in Qatar, and Russia is sending drones into Poland. Things are getting very spicy. First, Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. GCU equips you to serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself to glorify God. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 340 academic programs as of September 2024, GCU meets you where you are, provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. There are so many institutions of higher education that are not educating people. They are just indoctrinating you in nonsense. Not so at Grand Canyon University. Go check them out right now. gcu.edu. Also, here's the reality. Over 90% of Americans are not getting enough dietary fiber. Most of us aren't hitting that recommended variety of fruits and veggies either. I know I wasn't. That's why I tried Balance of Nature supplements. These aren't some artificial knockoff trying to mimic what nature provides. Just let nature do its job. We're talking about 47 real ingredients: mango, wild blueberries, spinach, kale, shiitake mushrooms, broccoli, the whole deal. Plus, their fiber and spice blend is also unique. It combines 4 whole fibers like psyllium husk and flaxseed with 12 aromatic spices, including turmeric and cinnamon. You're not going to find another supplement that does all of this. I also appreciate there are no artificial additives, no added sugars, just clean ingredients. They're vegan, kosher certified by the OU, and gluten-free. You can even mix the powder into smoothies or sprinkle it over food. No bags, no mess, no measuring. I'm bringing it on the road with me because honestly, I tend to get sick when I travel. I need my balance of nature. After years of research and development, they've now created something that makes getting proper nutrition actually convenient. Head on over to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get that free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com. Promo code Shapiro. Again, balanceofnature.com. Promo code Shapiro. And meanwhile, there are concerns about the state of the economy. Those concerns were actually underblown last year, as it turns out. So there have now been massive revisions in terms of the economic reports about the last year of the Biden administration. Apparently, according to the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics, the pace of job growth was significantly weaker than reported from early 2024 through early this year. In fact, the official data showed between April of 2024 and March of 2025, 1.79 million jobs being added. Actually, as it turns out, we overcounted by 911,000 jobs. More than half of those jobs, in other words, did not exist. So that means the average pace of seasonally adjusted employment gains moves from 147,000 jobs a month over that period to a bit over 70,000. Basically, we were in the middle of stagflation at the end of Joe Biden's presidency, continuing into today. Tuesday's report marks the largest preliminary revision on record going all the way back to 2000. That includes the wake of the financial crisis. The job market has been significantly slowing. It has been slowing for a year. That is not new. It has not been healed by the tariffs. And this is a problem. Because here's the thing. All the important things that need to be done to protect Americans, to make America safer abroad and at home, those will go by the wayside and you will end up with a Zoran Mamdani Democratic Party in charge of the country if the economy goes south. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan is pointing out that he has worries about slowing in the economy.
I think the economy is weakening. Whether that is on the way to recession or just weakening, I don't know, and that just confirms what we already thought, kind of.
And I know
that's a big revision. So
those are big revisions. Yeah. I believe it's the biggest going back to 2000. And the day after you and I sat down in North Carolina about a month ago was the day that President Trump fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And since then, there have been some questions around, politicization of the data. And since you operate such a sprawling bank and you have unique insights, do you see any gaps between the numbers that the government's putting out and what you see within your own firm? And are you increasingly relying more on the numbers that you see within your own firm?
No, we get data like you wouldn't believe. The government data is important. Our own data is important. We get data from non-government sources, and you can look at delinquency data, worldwide data, trade data. We get all of that, but trying to figure out what the economy is going to do is still hard to do with all that data. And maybe one day AI will fix that problem, but hopefully things will be okay. But you do see that kind of weakening, unfortunately.
Now, again, it does feel as though things are on the precipice. It does feel as though things are on the edge. When you talk to investors, they're very worried. It's one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve is very likely to lower the interest rates, not just once, but many times over the course of the next year in an attempt to spur demand and make borrowing easier. Inflation, by the way, ate up all of America's wage gains last year, leaving household incomes little changed beyond the richest households, according to the Census Bureau on Tuesday. Inflation-adjusted median household income was $83,730 in 2024, which is exactly the same as 2023. So inflation basically ate up everything. The Joe Biden economy was incredibly weak. And again, this is a point worth noting that if the Trump administration wants Americans to feel sanguine, then the economy needs to be stronger. And it's not about the data that is coming out from the BLS. It is about the feeling that Americans have about their economic future. And their feelings about their economic future right now are a little bit dicey. And that is because levels of uncertainty, it's because of the vacillations in policy, it's because of a tremendous feeling of just roiling in the economy, and that the biggest tech companies are basically the ones who are floating the economy at this point. It's something to keep an eye on for sure, and I hope that the Trump administration reverts to Trump 1.0 economic policy. They have in some areas, deregulation and tax cuts being some of them. When it comes to the tariff war, again, I do not think that the continuation of the tariff war is likely to result in a booming economy the way President Trump believes, apparently, that it will. Okay, meanwhile, in other big news, yesterday was a huge foreign policy news day. It began yesterday morning with Israel conducting a relatively unprecedented airstrike in Qatar. So yesterday morning, Israel conducted an airstrike to try and assassinate a series of Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar. That is because the president of the United States had put out an offer to both Israel and Hamas. Hamas would free the hostages. Hamas would disarm. The United States would help broker an end to the war. President Trump said this is the final offer or something will happen. And then it turns out that something happened. That something was because Hamas rejected the deal, which the entire Western media ignored, by the way. They said in Arabic that they had rejected the deal. After they rejected the deal, Israel promptly flew F-16s 1,000 miles away to Qatar and struck a single site some 10 times. It is still unclear at this point who among the Hamas top brass was killed, who escaped, whether they were maybe notified by somebody inside the Qatari government. That remains a cause for speculation. Qatar, of course, is a sort of in-between country. They're an ally to the United States in the sense that we have an airbase there. They also tend to play a middle role between the United States and Iran, meaning they closely coordinate with the Iranian government. They have funded, to the tune of billions of dollars, Hamas. They host Hamas top brass there. They have been for a decade, staying at 5-star hotels. Qatar also will spread billions of dollars in propaganda money, including via Al Jazeera, all around the globe on behalf of Muslim Brotherhood-aligned groups like Hamas. So Qatar is certainly not a player with clean hands. They never have been. And the United States' bizarre obsession with the idea that Qatar is somehow a big friendly. Now, Qatar is friendly in the same way that Pakistan is friendly, meaning that they're kind of, sort of, sometimes aligned. That certainly did not stop the United States from killing Osama bin Laden inside Pakistan, for example. I mean, this tape that we're about to show you is a flashback to October 7th, 2023. These are all leaders of Hamas literally celebrating October 7th in Doha, Qatar. So I will shed no tears if these people were blown up, because these are some of the most evil people on planet Earth. And yes, they are shielded by the Qatari government. Here's what it looked like on October 7th, 2023, lest we forget. This is them paying homage and being very grateful. Some of these people are dead. The leader there is Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed in an Israeli targeted strike in Iran. Delightful people in the heart of Doha, Qatar. Just wonderful. Well, the Israelis said that it was a wholly independent Israeli operation. Israel initiated it. Israel conducted it. Israel takes full responsibility. The Qatar Foreign Ministry condemned the attack as reckless and cowardly and said that it, quote unquote, targeted residential buildings housing several members of the political bureau of Hamas. Well, those aren't like specifically residential buildings if they are, housing the political bureau of a terrorist group. The Trump administration tried to draw some distance from the actual strike. Suffice it to say, Israel would not have bombed a site in Qatar, which hosts a massive American airbase, unless America had prior notice. It is that simple. Any contentions to the contrary are false. I'm sorry, reality still exists in the world where I am from. And the idea that a very strong and close American ally like Israel would not have let America know in advance what was going on while flying sophisticated military weaponry 1,000 miles toward the general area of an American airbase is insane. Yes, America knew about this, but we're going to pretend that America didn't, apparently. So here's what Caroline Leavitt had to say at the White House.
This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages in Gaza and the bodies of the dead released, and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. The Prime Minister told President Trump that he wants to make peace, and quickly.
Okay, now again, the latter half of the statement is the actual part that matters. The whole we knew nothing, we had no idea what was coming. I frankly just don't believe that. But even if that is true, the latter part is the part that matters, in which the United States quite properly says that taking out top members of Hamas advances peace, because it does. If the people who are refusing a deal refuse to make a deal, then additional pressure is obviously necessary in order to compel a deal. And this, by the way, is Israel's last-ditch effort to force a settlement of this before a full-scale takeover of Gaza City, which is likely to be costly in terms of Israeli time, blood, and treasure. They have to go house to house in a significantly populated area, despite the fact that Israel is telling everybody in Gaza City to evacuate to humanitarian enclaves. Hamas is literally blocking roads and shooting people in order to prevent them from leaving these areas so they can use them as human shields. So this is an attempt to actually end the war in faster fashion. Qatar, of course, is not an honest broker in any of this. It would not surprise me in the slightest if we found out that Qatar had warned the leaders of Hamas to get out in time. That would not be a shock in any way, shape, or form. Some others who've been shedding some crocodile tears over this include the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia put out a statement saying that they condemn and denounce in the strongest possible terms the brutal Israeli aggression and blatant violation of the sovereignty of the state of Qatar. The kingdom affirms its full solidarity and support for Qatar, placing all its capabilities at its disposal to assist in any measures it may take, while warning of the grave consequences of the Israeli occupation's persistent criminal assaults and its blatant violations of the principles of international law and all international norms. Just going to point out at this point that the Israeli planes would have had to fly over large chunks of the airspace of Saudi Arabia. So the chances that Saudi Arabia had no idea what was going on are approximately zero. Beyond that, listening to the Saudis caterwaul over the killing or attempted killing of Muslim Brotherhood-associated terrorists in another nation, even in an American allied nation, I don't believe you, since the Saudi royal government literally ordered the chainsawing and murder of a Muslim Brotherhood-associated journalist in the embassy, the Saudi embassy in Turkey, which is a NATO state. So yes, I feel like you are crying some crocodile tears there. As per the usual arrangement in the Middle East, many people are very happy at what Israel did, but they're going to pretend that they are very sad, which is usually the way that it goes in the Middle East. Meanwhile, France, Spain, and the UK all condemned Israel. Again, not a shock there, since all three are soon-to-be Islamic states of their own. It is incredible, the suicidal empathy, in the words of Gad Saad, that are employed by France, Spain, and the United Kingdom. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron condemned the strikes. Starmer said the priority must be an immediate ceasefire, the release of hostages, and a huge surge in aid to Gaza. Well, cool. The only problem, of course, is there has been no offer to release all of the hostages. And as for an immediate ceasefire, Israel is perfectly, if they get the hostages, they're willing to do it. Meanwhile, Macron said today's Israeli strikes on Qatar are unacceptable, whatever the reason. I express my solidarity with Qatar and its Emir Sheikh Tamim Al Thani. Under no circumstances should war spread throughout the region. Of course, it won't. It is a targeted strike. There will be no additional war throughout the region. The idea that it's somehow an escalation for Israel to kill members of Hamas in Qatar, but not an escalation for, Qatar to host members of Hamas to the tune of billions of dollars, billions a year for a decade. Well, only the French could come up with something that perverse and twisted. The whorehouse of the world, the French government. Yes, indeed. Well, meanwhile, it's always fun to hear from idiot Democrats like Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, who says that the recent attacks on Hamas diminish the prospects of returning people alive. Well, that's weird, since Hamas literally rejected the prospect of returning hostages alive this morning, or yesterday morning, rather.
Well, this certainly diminishes the prospects of returning the hostages, and particularly those that are still alive, because what Hamas is saying right now is that the United States lured these people into Qatar in order to set up the Israeli strike. So that undercuts our ability to be an interlocutor and someone that can help moderate a peace. And it certainly increases their disbelief in whether Netanyahu is serious about a ceasefire and a release of the hostages.
Already coming up, Russia actually sent a bunch of drones last night over into Poland. Actually, it's getting very, very spicy out there. Plus, new polling showing Zohran Mamdani is almost certain to be the next mayor of New York. First, I'm eating out a lot. It happens a lot. And some of my favorite meals are meals that I'm ordering out. But when I'm at home, how do I get, that kind of, listen, my wife is a great cook, but she doesn't have time to cook every night. Well, this is where Cook Unity comes in. Whether you eat to live or live to eat, Cook Unity delivers fresh, chef-crafted meals straight to your door. Their ever-expanding menu of over 300 small batch meals adapts to your dietary needs. So whether you're adventurous or have specific requirements, there's always something new to discover. We all know cooking quality meals takes actual time. It doesn't have to be your time. Cook Unity takes care of everything. No shopping, no meal planning, no cleanup. Just heat up restaurant quality dishes in as little as 5 minutes and you are now done. Cook Unity's chef lineup has Food Network favorites, James Beard Award winners, and restaurateurs whose names you'd recognize from the best dining scenes all across the country. With rotating seasonal meals from top chefs, plus new options added weekly, you're never going to get stuck in a food rut when you're looking through their hundreds of options. At just $11 per meal, you're getting culinary masterpieces for way less than takeout or those crazy grocery store prices. Plus, it's completely commitment-free. Skip, pause, cancel whenever you want. Producer Jake has been just raving about this. Like he won't stop. Like it's getting annoying, actually. Fuel your day with the freshest, best tasting meal delivery made by award-winning chefs. Go to cookunity.com/BenFree or enter code BenFree before checkout for free premium meals for life. That's free premium meals for life by using code BenFree or heading on over to cookunity.com/BenFree. Also, I'm sure most of us think home security means that you wait for something bad to happen and then an alarm goes off at 3 a.m. and it scares everybody. It scares you. Well, here's the thing. Once an intruder is inside your home, the damage is already being done. Your sense of security, that fundamental feeling of safety in your house, it's been violated. Real protection isn't about responding to crime. It's about preventing the crime from happening before it even begins. That's why I've partnered with Simply Safe, a system built around the idea that best security is proactive, not reactive. Here's how it works. Simply Safe uses smart AI-powered cameras to identify threats lurking outside your home and immediately alert their professional monitoring agents. These agents intervene in real time before the break-in even starts. They access two-way audio to confront the person, trigger sirens and spotlights to scare them off, request rapid police dispatch when needed, all helping to stop the intruder while they're still outside. That's real security. I've joined the more than 4 million Americans who trust Simply Safe with their home security every day. And with a 60-day money-back guarantee and no long-term contracts, Simply Safe earns your business by keeping you safe and satisfied every single day. Now again, Simply Safe protects our stuff here at the studio. We got some really nice cameras here. We wouldn't want them to be missing. Simply Safe makes sure that doesn't happen. Visit simplysafe.com/Shapiro. Claim 50% off a new system. That's simplysafe.com/Shapiro. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Okay, so meanwhile, the situation abroad continues to percolate in a wide variety. It turns out that nefarious nations, nefarious countries and leaders do nefarious things. I know it's a shock because the typical routine that we get from the horseshoe theory right and left is that everything is blowback to American activity. But last night, Russia apparently decided to unleash drones over Polish territory. Now, Poland is, of course, a member of NATO. If these Shahed drones, which are Iranian-made drones, were to crash in Poland, you could be looking at an Article 5 intervention, which means NATO would be directly at war with Russia. And Russia is playing around. They've been doing this sort of thing in Moldova as well. Apparently, there is footage of fighter jets flying over the skies outside Lublin city center in eastern Poland in an attempt to protect against these sort of drone incursions. According to newsukraine.rbc.ua, on the night of Wednesday, September 10th, Russian Shahed drones, which are again Iranian-made, the alliance between Russia, China, and Iran is fairly solid, crossed the Ukrainian border and entered Polish airspace, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. At around 1:13 a.m., the Ukrainian Air Force reported the Russian army had launched several new groups of Shahed strike drones. It was reported the enemy Shahed drones had left Ukrainian airspace and were now detected over Poland. They were heading west toward the city of Zamość. At the same time, monitoring channels indicated Poland had scrambled its F-16 fighters to intercept any of those drones. It is likely that this is a screw-up by the Russian government. However, long wars with increased Russian aggression can result in particularly bad activity. And Russia, of course, has been radically escalating. Their drone assaults on Kyiv have been escalating night after night after night. According to the Wall Street Journal, just 2 days ago, a Russian glide bomb killed at least 23, mostly elderly, in eastern Ukraine. And of course, we have seen drone attacks numbering in the hundreds of drones all across Ukraine over the course of the last week. There's no question that Russia, Iran, its allies, they are pushing. They are pushing. And the West ought to push back, sufficient to deter all of this. One final note on the foreign policy front. I have to say that Greta Thunberg, she would be more irritating if she weren't so hilariously incompetent. I mean, truly, truly bad at this. So apparently, Greta Thunberg, she has this Gaza-bound flotilla. This is her new cause. When it turned out that she couldn't stop the sun from making the earth warm, and she decided that the best thing to do would be to complain and whine about the Gaza Strip. And so she has twice now attempted to float her way to Gaza. The first time she was picked up and arrested. Well, her boat was in Tunisia. And she accused, and members of the crew accused Israel of hitting the boat with a drone. And this led to the usual suspects on X.com, your repository for massive amounts of human stupidity, to immediately assume that Israel was somehow droning Greta Thunberg. They weren't. I know. They weren't. What actually happened, hilariously enough, is that some moron on her boat fired a flare, and the flare came down on the boat and set it on fire. So they had posted a video of the flare coming down, calling it a drone attack, and actually, it was actually just a flare that someone fired in the air and it came back down because that's how gravity works. What a club of utter droogs. Seriously. Greta Thunberg, our moral exemplar. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to enforce the law with regard to ICE, and Democrats continue to be befuddled by this. It really is amazing. So the Democrats have a rule. That rule is that they are going to completely misinterpret the Supreme Court to the worst possible effect every single time. So the Supreme Court recently ruled that a restraining order from a federal judge in LA restricting ICE from conducting stops without reasonable suspicion could be removed. The restraining order could be removed. The concurrence in this particular case was written by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And essentially, the decision said that you can use a wide variety of factors in coordination to determine whether or not you can pull somebody over and ask them about their immigration status. And those things can be like where you are. Are you in a Home Depot parking lot where day laborers who are frequently illegal immigrants are picked up? Are you in an area that has a lot of illegal immigrants? Is the person Latino is one of the factors, but does the person speak English well or almost not at all? This would be cause for reasonable suspicion. That does not mean you can arrest the person, but you can actually ask them for their immigration status. So the left immediately said this is racial profiling. Sonia Sotomayor wrote a 21-page dissent because anything that is worth saying in one sentence requires 21 pages from our second most foolish justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, now taking the cake. She wrote, quote, "We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job." Well, they can't. The government can ask them about their immigration status in a high illegal immigrant area, because otherwise, how precisely would it be that you can enforce immigration law? Reasonable suspicion is always the basis of, for example, a stop and frisk or a request for ID. Sotomayor said that ICE agents are not simply questioning people, they are seizing people by using firearms and physical violence. Kavanaugh said immigration stops based on reasonable suspicion of illegal presence have been an important component of U.S. immigration enforcement for decades, across several presidential administrations. But of course, we have to do this the dumb way. So yesterday, Mika Brzezinski over on MSNBC got into it with Tom Homan, and Tom Homan had to explain that actually detaining people and then sometimes deporting people is not, in fact, disappearing people like you are taking them and sending them to a Stalin gulag.
I speak with integrity, I speak with honesty, and I speak with facts. The bottom line is, because of all this false narrative, and you using the term disappearing people,
well,
is
that's
disgusting.
What's happened. That happened to the group that was sent to El Salvador.
U.S. citizens get arrested every day. U.S. citizens get arrested by police every day. Are they being disappeared? No, their laws are being enforced. They're being arrested. They're being put in detention because they committed a criminal offense.
Not like what you're doing.
Not
even close.
We're enforcing the law and arresting people here in violation of law that are public safety threats. That's not disappearing people. That's enforcing the laws of this country and making this country safer.
Well, I mean, that seems perfectly legitimate, but it wasn't over there. Homan then had to explain to Mika Brzezinski that actually when people come into the country illegally, that is a crime for which you can be arrested and deported.
If they're in the country illegally, that is not okay. And people think illegal immigration is a victimless crime, and it's not. I don't know the case. I don't know the public safety threat, but I will say this. There are millions of people standing in line, taking their tests, doing the background investigation, paying the fees to be part of the greatest nation on earth. And the people who are doing things the right way are sitting on the back seat while we had millions of people come across the border in the Biden administration and cheated the system. People can call them asylum seekers all they want, but if you look at immigration court data, nearly 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border under Biden end up with an order of removal because they don't qualify for asylum. They're pushing themselves to the front of the line, and there are thousands of people in the world who actually are escaping fear and persecution from their homeland. They're sitting in the back seat while people have violated laws, disrespected this nation. If you want to be a part of the greatest nation on earth, there's a right way and wrong way to do it.
Again, if Democrats continue to insist, and legacy media members continue to insist, that everybody pretend that illegal immigration is not a crime, good luck to them. Well, folks, big announcement. The wait is nearly over. Tonight, we are celebrating a decade of The Daily Wire with the live premiere of our brand new show, Friendly Fire, at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're not here just to tell stories of the past. I mean, we'll do some of that, but it's not a nostalgia hour. We're giving you a first look at what is coming up in our second decade. New series, new projects, gigantic announcements, surprises we've been holding back until this very moment. This is the official start of our next decade. It's the live premiere of Friendly Fire. All of us together doing what friends do. Argue, debate, smoke a few Mayflower cigars, listen to Michael jabber on about Dante or something. Watch live tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern at dailywire.com and on the Daily Wire Plus app. Well, Democrats do have one thing that they're using against President Trump, and that, of course, is Epstein. So they're still trying to make fetch a thing. I do not think very many Americans at this point think that the Epstein case is a top 40 issue for them. I understand that for some people, this is like the biggest issue in their life. I get it. And there's still lots of open questions about where Epstein got his money. I think that's still the biggest remaining open question. Why were some figures signing him gigantic checks, for example? I think that those are real and open questions. However, the idea that Donald Trump is covering for some sort of foreign intelligence ring, or that Donald Trump is trying to cover for prominent people who are raping children, there is zero evidence adduced to this fact at this point in time. And yet everybody continues to try to go after in the media Donald Trump because Donald Trump wrote a note before Jeffrey Epstein was ever indicted for his activities with underage girls that was sort of a racy note. Now, the Trump administration claims that Trump didn't even sign the thing. I think Trump signed it. I mean, by looking at it, that is Donald Trump's signature. I don't think Trump wrote it. I think that somebody else in his office probably wrote it, and then he probably signed it, which is something that frequently happens in, major businesses, is that you will have an assistant write a thing and you might sign it. Particularly a birthday card you don't care very much about. But the media are not letting go of this. They believe that Epstein is somehow going to bring down Trump, which is weird because the same exact 50th birthday lookbook, or whatever they were calling it, that went to Jeffrey Epstein included a relatively racy note also from Bill Clinton. But nobody on the left seems to care about that, obviously. I mean, listen, they were fine with Bill Clinton allegedly raping Paula Jones. And they were fine with Bill Clinton stooping the interns in the Oval. So why would they be upset about this now? They're just pretending to be upset about it by pretending that Donald Trump is somehow to blame. According to Matt Visor at the Washington Post, for Trump, latest Epstein disclosures bring continued political pain. Have you seen any polling data that suggests serious political pain attendant on this? Seriously? Because I think most Americans are chalking up Donald Trump's rather checkered personal life to the fact that Donald Trump has a rather checkered personal life. I do not think that many Americans believe that Donald Trump was raping underage girls or trafficking in underage girls or anything remotely like that, or covering up for people who are trafficking in underage girls. Levitt said, quote, "I did not say the documents are a hoax. I said the entire narrative surrounding Jeffrey Epstein right now that is absorbing many of the liberal cable channels on TV is a hoax." I mean, that's fair enough. Here's Maggie Haberman over at the New York Times confronting Caroline Levitt over President Trump's denial of the reality of this supposedly horrifying note.
You said the Epstein documents are a hoax that Democrats are perpetrating against the president. You've said he didn't sign that check, that he didn't sign the birthday card that he allegedly signed. So what is the theory, since these documents came from the Epstein estate? Who is I guess in your view, faking these documents?
I did not say the documents are a hoax. I said the entire narrative surrounding Jeffrey Epstein right now that is absorbing many of the liberal cable channels on television is a hoax that is being perpetuated by opportunistic Democrats like Ro Khanna and the others whom you saw on that press conference outside of Capitol Hill, who are trying to push this hoax against the President of the United States.
What exactly is the hoax? I'm just trying to understand what's fake. What's fake is not the documents.
The hoax is the Democrats pretending to care about victims of crime when they do not care about victims of crime, when they have done nothing to solve crimes, when they have done nothing to lock up child and child rapists across the country, and when they are now using victims as political props to try and, again, smear the president of the United States and drag on this bad story about him. It is a distraction. The Democrats view this story as nothing more than an attempt to distract from the accomplishments and the achievements of this administration, and that is what we mean when we call it a hoax.
And meanwhile, Thomas Massie, who has been making this his signal issue, mainly because he's seeking to undermine President Trump's credibility. He doesn't like President Trump's foreign policy. That's really what this is about. And so Thomas Massie has decided this is his big issue. He was with James O'Keefe discussing.
Is it that the Republicans fear Trump so much, but they agree with you privately? How they just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it. That's it in a nutshell. I don't think my colleagues are happy about covering up for, but that's what's happening. And it's so sick and twisted. The reason they're doing it is because they're terrified of President Trump's political machine. Not just his legislative affairs folks are reaching out from the White House to every Republican member of Congress who might think about co-sponsoring this. They're getting calls from the political machine that Donald Trump runs. We've got members of Congress who have aspirations of running for statewide office. And they can't win a statewide office in a Republican primary with Donald Trump on the other side. So they're terrified of him.
Okay, or maybe many Republicans look at this case and given the fact that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and the president and the vice president and everybody else has access to all this information, they think there's not a lot of there, and this actually is just another attempt to harm President Trump's presidency. Because that seems, pretty credible. Okay, quick update from New York. Apparently, Zohran Mamdani now maintains a very large lead in this New York mayoral election. In New York, about to commit political suicide here. So, good luck to them. This new poll shows Zohran Mamdani at 46%, Andrew Cuomo at 24%, Curtis Sliwa now at 15%, and Eric Adams holding on for dear life at 9%. Now, it is true that if you combine everybody except for Mamdani, then they do have a slim lead, theoretically, over Mamdani. However, nobody has shown real interest in dropping out at this point. And so that basically guarantees that Mamdani is going to remain the frontrunner. Now, I think it is worth noting here how just far to the left the people of New York City are. Mamdani has an incredibly low approval rating when it comes to dealing with crime. His approval rating in dealing with the Trump administration is quite low. His strongest points are in dealing with affordability, where he really just says the word over and over, but has no idea how to achieve it, and on housing. But he also scores fairly strong marks with regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, showing what I've been saying all along, which is that inside the Democratic Party, being a complete Islamist psychotic about the Middle East actually is a feature, not a bug anymore, which we could have adduced from the fact that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are actually quite popular inside the base of the Democratic Party at this point. Well, if New York wishes to do this, they're going to get it good and hard because that is the way that democracy actually works. Alrighty, in just a moment, we're going to jump into the vaunted Ben Shapiro Show mailbag. But remember, you have to actually be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. There's only one piece of news today. One piece of breaking news. Beep, 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 beep. Tay-Tay, Travis Kelce, engaged. I know. Your mind is blown. Your world is shattered. Joy has broken out across the country. Also, there's some other news. The Cracker Barrel wars have been won. And also, actual real problems in the world. But first, time's almost up to save 40% on your Daily Wire Plus annual membership. Go to dailywireplus.com now and use code SUMMER before the deal is gone. Well, folks, it's rare that there is a day in which we have news that is so big, so incredibly important that it trumps not only all the other news of the day, but all the other news of the year, the decade, the century, nay, perhaps the millennium. Yes, it's finally happened. The most important event of our lifetime. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are engaged. I know. I, too, am flabbergasted, shocked. I am ecstatic. I mean, today is a magical day in the history of the United States and perhaps all of Western civilization. And listen, I will admit when I am wrong. 2 years ago, when these two lovebirds began their relationship, I thought this was just another of Taylor Swift's relationships that would end with a breakup album in which she sang like a 17-year-old about how sad she was that she'd been rejected, but don't worry, she don't need no man. But as it turns out, she does need her a man, and that man is Travis Kelce. And I have to say, like, unironically, I think it's great. I hope they have a wonderful marriage. I hope they have lots of kids. I hope she sings lots of songs about being married and having kids, and all those songs are better than her normal songs. That's what I hope for her, because I think that would be a very good thing for the West, for America, for young women particularly, who have been taught for generations that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, and that romance is somehow a sort of giveaway to patriarchal institutions. And it turns out, nope, actually a core component of human happiness is finding a member of the opposite sex and marrying them. This has always been a core component of human happiness, having babies with a member of the opposite sex in a long-lasting relationship built on love and mutual commitment. That is a very good thing. And I'm not saying that cynically. I mean that. It is excellent. I hope that they both live much happier lives. According to Variety, the couple shared the big news on Instagram with a carousel of photos and the caption, "Your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married." Put aside the idea that Taylor Swift would be a great English teacher. Charming. And the pictures are quite charming and quite normal. This does look like what it would look like if your English teacher and your gym teacher got married. It is perfectly normy, and I'm here for it. The normie revolution is happening. And this is like a normal couple getting married. Sure, she's a billionaire and he is a multimillionaire athlete, and that is a very, very large ring. I mean, that is some serious jewelry. But again, they can afford it. And you know what? Good for them. Good for them. It's charming, and I like, and it is good. And I hope that many other people take advantage of this situation to get married and follow in their footsteps, and then have long-lasting, decades-long marriages filled with children and grandchildren. I hope that is where this goes. It is actually culturally significant. It's culturally significant because tacitly, just as naturally, there has been, over the course of the last few decades, a rebellion against normality, a rebellion against the very idea that men and women ought to get married to one another, and that somehow all decisions that men and women make with regard to relationships are equally praiseworthy and equally useful and equally likely to lead to happiness. And that isn't true. Tacitly, what is happening here, and the reason people are celebrating, is that singledom is not ideal. It is not, in fact, a wonderful, happy thing. That doesn't mean you have to be miserable if you're single. What it does mean is that aspiring to be married, to be part of a happy marriage, is a wonderful thing. That is a good aspiration. It's an aspiration that is natural to the human heart. And that is why people are happy for Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. The idea that romance, a traditional romance between, the high school cheerleader and the high school quarterback, the reason that is sort of a platonic ideal in America is for a reason, because that is the basis of the forwarding of civilization. Marriage is the fundamental bedrock institution of all successful civilizations. And that's good. And so what this is tacitly is a cultural rejection of the idea that the actual ideal is non-marriage. That the actual ideal is prancing around like Madonna in your 70s, being a faded pop star, and try and convince everybody that actually you are super duper happy waking up drunk in the mornings by yourself in a 5-star hotel. These images are great. They're wonderful. They are good for the world. It also, by the way, happens to be a return to traditionalism in, wait for it, gender roles. Now, again, gender roles don't mean that you can't have a successful woman in a marriage. As I've said 1 million times at this point, my wife is a doctor. She went to medical school. I supported her while she went to medical school. We had babies while she went to medical school. So I'm very much in favor of women being able to work the jobs that they want to work. And so there is nothing unfeminine, for example, about Taylor Swift being a billionaire singer. That's fine. But she's very clearly a woman, and he is a platonic football star. He is a good-looking, large human who runs into other people for a living and knocks them down. It is, in fact, the English teacher and the gym teacher in a sort of cookie-cutter kind of way. That is absolute. Like, if you looked in a picture book for traditionalism and gender roles, what you would spot is Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, and then they would get married, and then they would have babies. And that is good, and I cannot wait for them to have children. First of all, it'd be good for them because children are wonderful for the world, and they are wonderful for the people who have them. They mature you. They make you a better person. Marriage also matures you and makes you a better person. So good for them. That's wonderful. It's spiritually fulfilling and awesome. And I hope many, many people who are heretofore anti-marriage or ambivalent about marriage, ambivalent about baby making, I hope all of them decide that Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are right, and then they follow the pattern. I hope they do that. I really do. I think it's a good thing because there are a lot of young people who are not going to listen to, fuddy-duddy old conservatives like me who have been preaching this for legitimately my entire life, but will listen to Taylor Swift or at least follow her example. That's a very good thing. Again, nothing I'm saying here is being ironic. I mean this absolutely sincerely. So maybe we get a Taylor Swift baby boom, and that'd be very, very good for the civilization. That'd be excellent. What's going to be fascinating is to see what comes next for Taylor Swift aesthetically and musically. So we made fun of her album cover, a couple of weeks ago on the program, the very kind of over-sexualized album cover. And we pointed out that she's been getting more and more sexual in her album covers. It's going to be hard to do that when you're married and when you presumably then go on to have kids. It doesn't have quite the same sort of resonance. So what's going to happen to Taylor Swift? Well, I think that Taylor Swift happens to be a marketing genius. I don't know if she's a musical genius. I've made that opinion clear. I think the Tortured Poets Department is a terrible album. But when it comes to her marketing ability, Taylor Swift is legitimately the greatest who has ever played the game. She is amazing at the game, for sure. Which is why the entire media went nuts when she gets married, right? When she gets engaged, the entire media goes insane. Here, for example, is CBS's Olivia Rinaldi flipping out over the engagement.
Taylor Swift is engaged. Taylor Swift is engaged. Taylor Swift is engaged. Come back to me. She just posted it. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, it's huge. The ring is ginormous. This is so exciting. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God, it's on her Instagram. It's on her Instagram. It's on her Instagram. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I feel like Paul Revere right now. This is a very exciting moment for me in my professional career because I get to announce that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are engaged. As you're talking to Joe Lang, our lovely producer Gabby Ake texted me and said, Taylor Swift's engaged, and you can see it right there on her social media. She put it up in that post that they got engaged with the caption, your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married, with a little dynamite.
Olivia Rinaldi, by the way, is the White House reporter for CBS. These are serious people, supposedly, who are super duper duper excited. In fact, the president of the United States was asked about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce getting engaged. Here's what President Trump had to say.
Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are engaged, and the world wants your reaction, sir.
Well, I wish him a lot of luck. No, I think he's a great player. I think he's a great guy, and I think that she's a terrific person. So I wish them a lot of luck.
Good for him. And again, it's good. We found the one thing Americans can unite upon. Coming up next, even more on Tay-Tay. You thought there was no more. Wrong you are. We have more on Tay-Tay. First, can the Fed take the right action at the right time? Or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? What does that mean for your savings? I don't know about you. I diversify with gold through Birch Gold Group. I do it for peace of mind, knowing if the bottom falls out, I have something tangible I can depend on. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify into gold as well. If you have an IRA or old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or you can just buy some gold to keep in your safe. I've worked with Birch Gold before. They've obviously been an advertiser on the show for years, but I've actually bought a fair bit of gold from Birch Gold. I call them up. I get my questions answered. I order it in my safe today. Get educated. That's how it starts. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. Just text the word BEN to the number 989898. Again, text BEN to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Fed can't stay ahead of the curve for the country, at the very least, you can stay ahead for yourself. Again, text BEN to 989898 to get started with my friends over at Birch Gold and start diversifying. It is a smart financial strategy. Also, what does feeling safe at home really mean? I used to think that good locks, a loud alarm were enough. True security means preventing that break-in from ever happening in the first place. And that's why we here at Daily Wire trust Simply Safe to protect the studio and our employees. It's security that's proactive, not just reactive. And Simply Safe means that when we come here in the morning, we know that all of our cameras are here. It means that when our employees are leaving late at night, they don't have to worry somebody is breaking in simultaneously. Most security systems are reactive. They only spring into action after somebody has already broken in, which defeats the purpose. Simply Safe's new Active Guard outdoor protection flips that script by stopping break-ins before they happen. Their AI-powered cameras work with live monitoring agents to spot suspicious activity around your property. If somebody's lurking where they shouldn't be, agents can actually talk to them in real time, Flip-on spotlights, call police if needed. It's pretty impressive that over 4 million Americans already trust Simply Safe. They've earned recognition as CNET's best home security system of 2025, plus top rankings for customer service from Newsweek and USA Today. With monitoring starting around $1 a day, no contracts or hidden fees, and a 60-day money-back guarantee, it's designed to give you real peace of mind without the usual headaches. Visit simplysafe.com/Shapiro. Claim 50% off a new system with a professional monitoring plan. Get your first month for free at simplysafe.com/Shapiro. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So pop, as a medium, is a teenage medium. It is a medium that is made for teenage girls and people, because we have now prolonged adolescence, who are in their mid-20s. You don't see a lot of 50-year-olds walking around singing pop. Not only that, pop music is based in certain tropes. You know, being brokenhearted about your latest breakup, or being F you about your latest breakup, or something about your latest breakup. Like, all of pop music is basically rooted in sexual lust in terms of its lyrics and or emotional problems. That's what pop music is about, which is why people age out of it. At the minute that women stop being sexually alluring, it's very difficult for them to be successful in the pop world. And women age out of that in the pop world pretty quickly, right? Katy Perry right now is the butt of enormous mockery online for her latest tour. She's considered to be too old for the game. Katy Perry is 5 years older than Taylor Swift. She is 40 years old. And she's kind of going in the opposite direction. And she just recently broke up with Orlando Bloom. And so she's kind of seen as desperate, trying to maintain attention. What's she going to do? And so can you be a 43, 45-year-old woman and singing about your latest breakup and how heartbroken you are the same way that you could when you were 30? Probably not. And is pop, as a musical medium, capable of carrying actual interesting messages about, for example, marriage and having kids? When I think of sort of the musical genres in which people sing about marriage and having children, the only one that pops to mind is actually country. So watch for it. I would not be totally shocked if Taylor Swift's next album, she moves back toward country. That would not be surprising to me at all, because that actually is a medium where people frequently sing about this kind of stuff. And of course, country is now broadened out to include things like Beyonce's latest album. So it would not be shocking to watch Taylor kind of move back into that medium, as opposed to the poppy, kind of drug-induced, hazy, Charlie XCX pop music that she's been doing for the last 5 or 10 years. It'll be fascinating to watch. But again, my great hope here is that an entire generation of young people, particularly young women, who were told by the feminist movement and by pop stars like Taylor Swift that relationships were bound to fail and they were all about this sort of teenage angst, mature along with Taylor Swift, see this as unabashedly good. By the way, again, you're not seeing a lot of blowback. That's what's fascinating. Despite all of the talk about how marriage is a patriarchal institution, marriage robs women of their identity, marriage and romance is simply a hallmark of our horrible sexist past, I've yet to see anybody, literally anybody, on the left talking about why it's so terrible for Taylor Swift to get engaged and married. The sort of Gloria Steinem take on marriage is dead. And Taylor Swift may have just put a stake through it, which is really quite fascinating, because it turns out marriage is a natural institution. Romance between men and women is a wonderful and natural thing. It turns out that women want, by the way, masculine men. You'll notice that Taylor Swift didn't end up marrying any of the sort of androgynous dudes that she dated. She ended up marrying, the football player with his doofus brother who does a podcast. Right? That's who she ended up marrying or getting engaged to. And he ended up marrying the, again, platonically beautiful cheerleader type. Like, it's about as classic a story from 1955 as you could find. And that's got to be driving some people nuts, but they won't say it. Or maybe naturally they understand that, again, deep in the human heart, there is, in fact, a desire by women for masculine men and by men for feminine women, and for both of them to get married and then have babies. So good luck to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Again, I think this is a very, very good thing for Western civilization. And if Western civilization needs more babies, hopefully this leads off the Generation Taylor baby boom. Okay, meanwhile, in other very, very important cultural news, but let's be clear. Everything pales in comparison to this. It was like an asteroid hit Earth and wiped out the dinosaurs yesterday. The only thing anyone cared about was this engagement. And I do have to say, it'll be fascinating to see what the wedding is like, because they could do an unexpected thing, which I think is probably what they should do. I think everybody expects them to have a $20 million wedding. I think what would be fascinating is if she sort of counter programs and does a low-key wedding in a church with Travis Kelce, classic Americana, just family and friends. I think that would actually be a very good brand move for her. Not that she needs my brand advice. She's way better at this than literally anyone who's ever lived in the history of planet Earth. But I think that would be counter-programming, especially in an era where there are so many people who are worried about conspicuous consumption and all of the rest. Well, I think we're done with this. Wait, breaking. This just in. Travis Kelce apparently has an ad for American Eagle. By the way, got to say, American Eagle crushing it with the ads. I mean, between Sydney Sweeney and now Travis Kelce and having an ad to drop like the day of a mind-blowing, universe-exploding announcement about Travis and Tay-Tay. Really good for American Eagle. Their branding department doing an amazing job. Here is the ad. Okay, so he's dressed in a tennis outfit. He's walking around America. There's an American flag and everything. Hugging random friends of many races. And laughing with many friends while wearing clothes. Because this is what you do in American Eagle outfits. You laugh with your friends. Okay. I mean, all right. Cool. Basically, I think they just had a Travis Kelce ad banked, and they were waiting for this particular moment. So again, good on the American Eagle ad department. I will say that is a very chunky sweater from American Eagle, and not my type of sweater. But again, smart advertising. Capitalism always wins, gang. Well, speaking of the power of advertising, I asked our friends and sponsors over at Comet, a project of perplexity, how much money is spent in the American advertising market, and how much did American Eagle spend on marketing last year? Apparently, total advertising spending in the United States for 2024 was $354 billion. A lot of money, reflecting the ongoing strength and growth of the American advertising market. So that is a lot of money. Obviously, a lot of companies spend a lot of money on advertising. American Eagle last year spent $206 million on advertising. I assume they're going to spend even more this year, but the Travis Kelce ad, the Sydney Sweeney ad, it just shows that a good piece of advertising, much more valuable than just throwing dollars at the thing. So, good on American Eagle for having signed up all of these talents, ready to drop an ad at a moment's notice if, the biggest marriage announcement in human history happens. But in other cultural news, the Cracker Barrel wars have been fought and they have been won. Cracker Barrel has backed down. And the old white dude on the Cracker Barrel billboards, he's back and he's better than ever with his creaky joints and his rocking chair. I'm making fun of this a little bit because, listen, do I think that it was like the most important thing in the world that Cracker Barrel tried to change its logo and then changed it back? No. Do I think that it was all about the wokeness? Not really. Do I think it was indicative of corporate America's disconnect from its own brand and from an enormous amount of white America? Yes. So do I think that the reams of paper and gallons of ink that have been spilled over Cracker Barrel's relatively mild rethink, that was deeply important? I'm not sure, but I understand that for many people, this is an issue of passion. Obviously, I don't operate in the Cracker Barrel world. Cracker Barrel is not kosher, so I've never eaten at one. It seems charming. I've heard from people they enjoy it. As the president would say, many people say that Cracker Barrel is so great, so wonderful. President Trump offered his own advice to Cracker Barrel just yesterday. And, the president coming off the sidelines to suplex Cracker Barrel basically ended the Cracker Barrel resistance. And he outflanked the Cracker Barrel woke forces. And he broke them like a champion. He put out a post on Truth Social. Cracker Barrel should go back to the old logo, admit a mistake based on customer response, the ultimate poll, and manage the company better than ever before. They got $1 billion worth of free publicity if they play their cards right. Very tricky to do, but a great opportunity. Have a major news conference today. Make Cracker Barrel a winner again. Remember, in just a short period of time, I made the United States of America the hottest country anywhere in the world. 1 year ago, it was dead. Good luck. Jonathan Capehart at MSNBC just last week was raging over MAGA voters, saying that he was sick of their outrage and all this stuff, but he loses. He loses. And MAGA wins. Cracker Barrel has been defeated. They were forced to sign their surrender at Appomattox. The U.S. restaurant chain has now abandoned its plans to adopt a new, generic, stupid-looking logo. The company said in a social media post, "We thank our guests for sharing your voices and love for Cracker Barrel. We said we would listen, and we have. Our new logo is going away. Our old timer will remain. America. President Trump then congratulated them on the reversal, magnanimous in victory as ever. Said, congratulations, Cracker Barrel, on changing your logo back to what it was. All your fans very much appreciate it. David Johnson, the CEO of Branding Strategy Vision PR Group, told BBC's U.S. partner, CBS, the rebrand was a flop. The shares had nosedived by about 7% following the announcement of the brand reversal. And now, presumably, you will see the brand shoot up to the stars, to the moon, because the war has been won. And the old man will still be leaning on that Cracker Barrel in their logo. And the pegboards never went away, right? I mean, they still had all the Americana in the stores. So again, do I think this was overblown some? Yeah, I do. But indicative of the winning streak of MAGA. Already coming up, horrifying story out of Scotland that's becoming a meme and kind of iconic, all about the Muslim migration problem across Europe. First, I got to tell you, steak. Steak is my jam, okay? But I can't always have the steak that I want. And this is where Cook Unity comes in. Whether you eat to live or live to eat, Cook Unity delivers fresh, chef-crafted meals straight to your door. Their ever-expanding menu of over 300 small batch meals adapts to your dietary needs. So whether you're adventurous or have specific requirements the way I do, there's always something new to discover. We all know cooking quality meals takes time. It doesn't have to be your time. Cook Unity takes care of everything. No shopping, no meal planning, no cleanup. Just heat up restaurant-quality dishes in as little as 5 minutes and you are now done. Cook Unity's chef lineup has Food Network favorites, James Beard Award winners, restaurateurs whose names you'd recognize from the best dining scenes across the country. With rotating seasonal meals from top chefs, plus new options added weekly, you'll never get stuck in a food rut when looking through their hundreds of options. And at just $11 per meal, you're getting culinary masterpieces for way less than takeout or those crazy grocery store prices. Plus, it's completely commitment-free. Skip, pause, cancel whenever you want. Producer Jake has been raving about this. I mean, he's been eating like a king thanks to Cook Unity. Fuel your day with the freshest, best-tasting meal delivery made by award-winning chefs. Go to cookunity.com/BenFree or enter code BenFree before checkout for free premium meals for life. That's free premium meals for life by using code BenFree or going to cookunity.com/BenFree. Also, Big Bird is dead. Okay, not literally. Like Big Bird's fine, but PBS just lost its government funding, and that means that you are no longer funding a lot of the woke programming over at PBS. MSNBC panicked over the idea that without Elmo and other programming that they apparently require, American families might, turn to PragerU. Oh no. They're right to be worried. Every day, more and more people are turning away from woke content, finding truth, values, and common sense through PragerU. Here's the thing. PragerU doesn't take a dime from Washington. Every dollar comes from people like you who care about truth, values, and raising kids who think for themselves. PragerU videos reach millions of people every single day, especially young people. They are changing minds at scale. Parents are noticing. Families are rejecting indoctrination and finding content they can actually trust. Stories about faith, freedom, personal responsibility, lessons your tax dollars will never teach. The best part, it is all free. But PragerU cannot grow without your help. If you want to make an impact on the next generation, this month is the perfect time to support PragerU. Every dollar given will be triple matched. That's correct, tripled. Donate right now at PragerU.com/DW. Triple the impact of your gift. That's PragerU.com/DW. Meanwhile, President Trump had himself a good time at the White House yesterday. He had a 3.5-hour presser. I mean, the man must hold his urine like a camel. I just have to say, that is a very, very long presser. My goodness. Wow. I guess one of the prerequisites to being a part of Trump's cabinet is that you can go a very, very long time without ever stepping out to use the restroom. President Trump himself mocked Joe Biden's pressers after this 3.5-hour presser that was longer than Godfather 1. And here he was.
You have not had this happen for 4 years. You sat and you'd ask one question to Biden, and it was always the ice cream question, right? What flavor ice cream do you like best? I like vanilla. And that was the end of the conference.
Our own Michael Knowles was there for this magnificent cabinet meeting. He was the first podcaster in human history to cover a cabinet meeting yesterday, an honor he richly did not deserve, but there he was. Marco Rubio, I think, had the line of the day, actually. So he was celebrating upcoming Labor Day, and Marco Rubio said, "I've never appreciated a Labor Day as much as this one."
Well, Mr. President, first of all, everyone's made this comment already and needs to be echoed again. You were elected as the president of working Americans, and that's why this Labor Day is so meaningful. For me personally, this is the most meaningful Labor Day of my life as someone with 4 jobs. And so... It's true.
Good line there from the Secretary of State, as well as the head of like the National Library, the official janitor of the United States, the head of the NSC, and about 8 other jobs. So, President Trump is having himself a good time. The Democrats are not having themselves a good time. The Democrats are in serious trouble. Harry Ensign over at CNN, he says the Democrats right now are about as popular as Cracker Barrel's rebrand attempt.
Democratic brand right now has about the appeal with the American voter as the Cracker Barrel rebrand has with the American consumers. Bad, bad, bad. What are you doing? Oh, my goodness gracious. What are we talking about here in terms of big party registration changes in the key swing states? Let's look at the key 4 swing states that, in fact, do keep track of registration by party. Look, the Republican Party is in their best position at this point in the cycle since at least 2005, and all 4 of these key battleground states.
Well, I mean, that is, I can't imagine why they're unpopular, except that you totally can. Democrats have been wrong-footed by President Trump at every single turn. That is particularly true on the issue of crime. Crime is just a terrible issue for Democrats. It has always been and will always be a terrible issue for Democrats until they get tough on crime, which apparently they've decided never to do again in the wake of Black Lives Matter Summer 2020. Jamie Raskin, representative from Maryland, he said, we keep focusing too much on crime, but crime has always been a part of American history. Oh, my God.
He's trying to militarize our society, intimidate his political opponents. The whole idea of picking cities based on their partisan leadership is absurd. I mean, there are lots of Republican cities and towns struggling with crime. Everybody is across the country. Always. Crime has always been part of our history, and yet crime is down. In D.C., for example, it's at a 30-year low.
Crime has always been a part of our history is a really, really bad argument to the person who just got carjacked. You should just acknowledge crime has been a part of American history. In fact, murder goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. It's always been a part of human history. So the fact that your family member was murdered in front of you on a street in Washington, D.C., just understand that's always been a part of human history. Good luck with this particular attempt. Meanwhile, the DNC summer meetings are going swimmingly for the Democrats. By swimmingly, I mean they are totally psychotic. I mean, I don't know what they are doing. Here is a DNC summer meeting speaker. Her name is Insha Rahman. She's the vice president for advocacy and partnerships at the Vera Institute of Justice, saying, what doesn't matter to people? Crime doesn't matter to people. I feel like crime matters to people.
You want to talk about the crime issues voters care about. Where does Trump go? Migrant crime, carjackings, the really lurid, awful stuff that is a crazy, crazy visual. Don't take the bait, because most Americans are more worried about how are we going to address mental health issues, the visible homelessness that we see on streets, and how do we deal with mental health and other issues that drive the sort of random incidents that scare all of us. That's what you should be talking about. That's where you should be focused. Don't take the bait in talking about migrant crime or carjackings or the things that actually don't matter to that many Americans.
They don't matter. They don't matter, which is why you guys are in the minority now. Things are going amazing for you. And that was the entire DNC. Apparently, the Democratic National Committee has decided that their chief pitch to other Democrats is the worst things happening in America are that criminals are going to prison and or being deported. Here, for example, is DNC member Millie Herrera crying about Alligator Alcatraz, which is just a holding facility in Florida for illegal immigrants, many of whom have committed significant crimes in the United States.
This is just unbelievable to a lot of us that have experienced persecution in other countries, that have fled to the United States thinking that we were protected here by our Constitution. So we are all together in this, and I really appreciate all the support, and I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry, all the support that immigrants are receiving from our party, because the Democratic Party is the party of immigrants, the party of working class, the party of women, the party of LGBTQ, disabled, everybody.
It is amazing. They're just going to continue to try to cram down this bizarre ideology, this ideology filled with luxury beliefs on the rest of America. Meanwhile, Democrats were chanting in support of illegal aliens yesterday as well. So things are going just amazing for Democrats across the country. Here were a bunch of Democrats wearing pink vests. Pink vests. I don't even know where you purchase these, but apparently they're available, maybe at Amazon or something, in favor of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an alleged human trafficker. So cool job, guys. You're doing great.
Kilmar is our neighbor. You can't have him, Trump. No! Kilmar is our neighbor. You can't have him, Trump. Heck no!
Wow. So a bunch of old, white, sexually fluid people singing in the worst possible way old folk songs with bad rewritten lyrics. You guys are doing amazing. You're doing amazing. That is when you're not standing for Hamas and their friends in Gaza. So the Democratic Party has decided they're just on the side of Hamas, period. Whatever they can do at this point to preserve Hamas, they will do. If that means telling lies about genocide, they will do it. If that means telling lies about mass purposeful starvation in Gaza, they will do it. If it means telling lies about what Israel is doing or how the war started or anything else, they will just continue to humor this kind of crap. And so you end up with DNC Chair Ken Martin yesterday saying that the crisis in Gaza is the thing that Democrats should be worried most about. By the way, that crisis is going to end in the very near future because Israel is going to finish off the war by either taking over Gaza City or Hamas is going to engage in some form of surrender and give up the hostages it currently holds. Again, this war could have been over literally October 6th by never starting, or it could have been over at any time by Hamas surrendering, disarming, going into exile and surrendering its hostages. They're not doing any of that. Israel has shipped in more food per capita than any conflict in the history of humanity. And here is the DNC lamenting the evils of Israel, of course.
The crisis in Gaza is urgent. This resolution is focused on the humanitarian crisis and makes clear that it must be addressed as the emergency that it is. As I've always said, we have to center humanity in this conversation. Thousands and thousands of innocent lives have been lost in this conflict. It has now become commonplace, unacceptably, to accept civilian lives as a casualty of conflict. One innocent life lost is one too many. My resolution calls for the secure and unrestricted flow of aid to Gaza, which is absolutely essential, and is the position of 44 Senate Democrats who signed a letter recently calling for a large-scale expansion in aid.
Okay, the key word there would be secure. If you give the aid to Hamas, then Hamas uses the aid. I mean, right now, there is no starvation in Gaza. You can see pictures from Gaza right now of the supermarkets. There are, in fact, markets in Gaza that are fully stocked. People who are going to the aid stations are leaving behind items, which is not something that starving people actually do. When he says secure, what he means is that he wants the UN back in charge so Hamas can continue to fight on. And when he says one civilian dead is too many civilians, I mean, of course, in an ideal world, no civilians would ever die. In an ideal world, Hamas would not be in charge of an entire swath of territory, murdering people who attempt to get aid, taking civilians hostages, attempting to build up military capacity again, and running the entirety of the Gaza Strip as a hellhole Sharia law tyranny. That would be the ideal. Unfortunately, we live in the real world over here where Hamas hides behind civilians in an attempt to preserve itself. This is never how war has worked, but if Democrats insist on living in the world of fantasy, they will probably continue to lose. All right, folks, in just a moment, we'll finally get to the Scotland story. It's totally crazy. And the second part of our breaking news story about the American Medical Association continues to be even more shocking. First, here's a not-so-fun fact. Disney+, Hulu, Netflix, Paramount+, they're all raising their prices again. You may have noticed. And then there's Daily Wire Plus, doing what we love to do. The exact opposite. We're not raising prices. We're actually dropping them. Right now, you can grab an annual Daily Wire Plus membership for 40% off with code SUMMER. That unlocks everything we've got, including the new episode of The Pope and the Fuhrer, the secret Vatican files of World War II. And on September 8th, you'll be first to watch the Isabel Brown Show. Plus, you get exclusive first looks at our brand new flagship show, Friendly Fire, where the entire Daily Wire crew goes head-to-head, live, uncensored, unfiltered, brutal, passionate. Go to dailywireplus.com, lock in 40% off your annual membership before that deal goes away. Alrighty, folks. So, meanwhile, over in Scotland, all hell has broken loose over a kind of amazing story, a pretty horrifying story. Actually, it's been underreported, and so we are still trying to find out what the details are on this story. All we have to go off of, really, is the fact that a 14-year-old girl was arrested for carrying a couple of knives. We know that much. And we have video of the actual incident in which she showed knives. So she was walking around a place called Dundee, Scotland, The allegation here that seems to be made, she's being taped by a couple of people, one of whom is clearly a male. Apparently, according to people who are associated with the case, this person is a migrant male, Muslim migrant male. And she is yelling, this young girl, 14 years old, yelling at this guy about staying away from her 12-year-old sister. The guy's filming her. She is carrying in one hand a knife, and in the other, it appears to be like a hand axe.
Yes, you have a knife. You don't have to drop it. Why are you fucking me tough? Get bashers. Show the knife. Show the knife. Show the. Away from us. Show the knife. Show the knife. Don't touch it. That's it. That's it. Show the knife. Don't touch my love. Show the knife. That's it. Don't touch my little sister. She has 12. Where's her touching me? She has 12 and you just battered me, man. Yeah, show the knife. Maracha. Don't touch her. You're to me.
So the man is obviously speaking with a foreign accent. He's saying, show the knife, show the knife. The girls are shouting, don't touch her, don't touch my sister, don't touch her. BBC reports, quote, a 14-year-old girl has been charged after allegedly brandishing a weapon on a street in Dundee. The incident happened in St. Anne Lane in the Lochie area of the city about 7:40 p.m. on Saturday. It's understood no one else has been arrested or is wanted in connection with the incident. And that's all the BBC reports. We really don't know much more than that at this point. There's been no follow-up report. We don't really know exactly what the story here is. The Economic Times reports that the video shows two teenage girls confronting a man who reportedly asked for their phone numbers and proceeded to grope one of them as per Western Standard, but I don't know what that site is. The older girl is then shown brandishing a knife and a hatchet while telling the man filming to stay away from her and her sister. The man was shouting, show the knife, and then the man appears to speak in Arabic, so that, of course, leads a bunch of people to believe that he is a Muslim migrant. Now, there's no question that there's been a massive uptick in sex crimes by foreign nationals across Europe. It is a very, very real thing. According to the UK Telegraph, foreigners accounted for 1 in 7 sexual offense convictions last year, including rapes. And this has been true across Europe. The migrant crisis of Europe has extended across the continent. It's been particularly bad in England. It's really been bad in England. That, of course, is connected with the decades-long cover-up of the sexual molestation of underage girls by rings of Muslim men, the so-called grooming gang scandal in England. The attempt by the authorities and by the media to bury that and to pretend that it had nothing to do with Islamic immigration, it had nothing to do with Muslim men who were abusing white girls in England, led to nationwide scandal, as it should have. Politician after politician covered it up. In June 2025, Yvette Cooper, who's the Labor Home Secretary, explained that they had done an investigation, but then downplayed the impact of Pakistani men. South Asian is the euphemism that's used in England for Pakistani or of Middle Eastern or Muslim descent.
Mr. Speaker, I warned in January that the data collection we had inherited from the previous government on ethnicity was completely inadequate. It was only collected on 37% of suspects. Baroness Casey's audit confirms that ethnicity data is not recorded for 2/3 of grooming gang perpetrators, and she says it is not good enough to support any statements about the ethnicity of group-based child sexual exploitation offenders at the national level. I agree with that conclusion, and frankly, it is ridiculous and helps no one that this basic information is not collected, especially when there have been warnings and recommendations stretching back 13 years about the woefully inadequate data on perpetrators, which prevents patterns of crime being understood and tackled. Ignoring the issues, not examining and exposing them to the light, allows the criminality and depravity of a minority of men to be used to marginalise whole communities. The vast majority of people in our British, Asian and Pakistani heritage communities continue to be appalled by these terrible crimes and agree that the criminal minority of sick predators and perpetrators in every community must be dealt with robustly by the criminal law.
Now, again, the reason that the grooming gang scandal was covered up in the first place had to do with the fact, and journalists openly acknowledged this at the time, It had to do with the fact that there was a widespread feeling among members of the left and the intelligentsia in England that if they acknowledged that there were large grooming gangs of Muslim men preying on white girls, that would somehow benefit the British National Party. That would help people like Tommy Robinson, which is insane. You're going to cover up the grooming of girls because it helps your political opponents if you point it out. Totally crazy. Maggie Oliver, who is one of the police officers responsible for uncovering the grooming gang scandal and really pursuing it to its end, she slammed Yvette Cooper after Yvette Cooper gave this whole speech about how we can't marginalize people and ethnic data is not available and all the rest.
I have heard it so many times before. I've heard this afternoon just more political point scoring, empty words, an apology for something that up until today they didn't care about. And I'm not a party political person, as I say. This is successive governments who have turned a blind eye, who have ignored decades of abuse of very vulnerable children because it was a political hot potato. Child abuse comes in all forms, in the home, in the church, in football. But these predators in the so-called grooming gangs, we're now calling them rape gangs, they are predominantly Pakistani Muslim men. We need to record ethnicity.
That, of course, is exactly right. But you'll recall back in January 2025 when the mayor of London suggested there was nothing to acknowledge about the grooming gang scandal at all.
I asked you this question last week and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
Avoid any misunderstanding. Can she define what she means by that?
Yes, if you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for what's a misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that.
And of course, she was right. So this case of this Scottish girl who's holding the knives, this of course has gone viral because it has meme potential online. We're still waiting to hear all the details. And so before jumping to a conclusion that we know exactly what's happening here based on the tape, I'll wait to hear more of the details. From what it appears to be, obviously, if we are now living in a situation in which the authorities refuse to protect British citizens from the predations of Muslim men because of political correctness, this is why Europe is dying. A Europe that refuses to defend itself is a Europe that will bow. It is a Europe that will surrender to the forces of darkness. We've seen this all over the continent. This is not just a problem in England. It is a problem in Germany. It is a problem in France. Michel Houellebecq, famous novelist, who wrote a book called Submission about what would happen in France if ever it gave over to Sharia law and why that would happen. It's a fascinating book. And it's a fascinating look inside the kind of post-religious modern mind in Europe. But the basic thesis of the book, which is that secular leftism leads to an emptying out of the spiritual strength necessary to combat the extremism of radical Islam, that part cannot be in dispute at this point in Europe. And that is why you're seeing so many people who are glomming onto the image of a young girl having to defend herself with knives, allegedly, from older men touching her who happen to be from parts of the earth where they simply do not recognize the primacy of women's sexual consent in the same way that people in the West do. That is just the incompatibility of certain cultures with other cultures is a reality. Refusing to acknowledge that reality is one of the reasons why the left is now in a state of serious political crisis all around the West. And meanwhile, speaking of refusals to acknowledge reality, yesterday we reported this shocking story about the AMA. We exposed the president of the American Medical Association, Dr. Bobby McCamala, for his incompetence and dereliction of evidence-based medicine. In nearly every case, the AMA has abdicated its duty to do no harm over and over. Dr. Bobby made it clear that the AMA defers to the experts. That's after the AMA has spent nearly 2 decades lending its credibility to the entire fraudulent industry of trans medicine. As it turns out, it only took a brief call with the head of the AMA for their house of cards to come tumbling down. Here's what it sounded like in yesterday's show when Dr. Bobby McCamala was confronted by Dr. Eitan Haim and Representative Brad Paquette.
Again, I don't read the science about somebody's broken femur.
But when the orthopedic surgeons come to me and they say that what they are dealing with to get somebody's femur fixed is not adequate and they need X, Y, and Z to help take care of patients with a broken femur, I defer to their expertise on a broken femur. When people that specialize in transgender care tell me that they're having a hard time taking care of their patients with this 50 to 70% suicide rate and they need X, Y, and Z as policy, then I defer to them because they're the ones that do patient care and I help them to get their patient care done.
I mean, it almost seems like you're intentionally staying away from these issues because...
No, I stay away from the science because I didn't do a residency in anything related to the science.
But thanks to Representative Paquette, the AMA kindly introduced the expert of their choice, Dr. Jesse Krikorian. Their conversation was, as you might expect by now, an unmitigated disaster for the AMA. Dr. Krikorian is a primary care physician at the University of Michigan. According to the Daily Wire's own investigation, Dr. Krikorian is transgender herself. Her name was Anne. She began going by Jessie and taking male hormones as recently as her undergraduate career at Swarthmore College, only a few years before applying for medical school. Dr. Krikorian is a family medicine PCP. That's the kind of doctor that you go to for an annual checkup or to get your kid a physical to enroll in a competitive sport. My wife is a doctor. She also happens to be a family physician. Neither she nor Dr. Krikorian possess expert knowledge about transgenderism or gender identity disorder or the use of puberty blockers in children, let alone adults. And yet this was the person the AMA used as their expert. It makes perfect sense that the AMA's handpicked expert on trans medicine is, 1, trans herself, 2, has no specialized training in psychology, endocrinology, or plastic surgery, and 3, seems to have been in practice for like 3 to 5 years. The absurdity abounds. Here's Representative Paquette asking Dr. Krikorian about how cross-sex hormones can cause infertility. Watch the tap dance from Dr. Krikorian.
How long does it take to become infertile for an adult to be on estrogen to become infertile from your vantage point?
We don't know for sure. It varies person to person. When I am counseling people on starting estrogen, it's a different story for testosterone. When it comes to starting estrogen, I counsel them that this will decrease their fertility. You don't want to count on it as birth control because it's not 100% guaranteed that it will make you infertile, but that you want to plan that this is going to make you infertile. If your life plan involves genetic children, go ahead, bank sperm before you go into this. I have started a lot of adults on estrogen. I have had only 1 or 2 who banked sperm. And part of that is because, honestly, sperm is not that hard to come by. You can buy it. You can access it. If you've got a partner who can carry a pregnancy, you guys can make it happen.
Oh, my goodness. Sperm is not that hard to come by? Whew. Well, Dr. Krikorian has no solid answer. If anything, Krikorian seems to admit that infertility is an issue and recommends that patients bank their sperm or buy some sperm from Miranda later on. Meanwhile, yesterday, we heard the AMA outright dismiss Dr. Haim's concerns about reversibility and infertility. No other medical field works like this, by the way. You don't go from being a primary care physician to an expert in brain cancer just because you personally had a brain tumor. You don't become more qualified and as an anesthesiologist because you might enjoy taking sedatives. But suddenly with gender-affirming care, the most prominent expert the AMA could offer is a trans person who is a family physician. That is not expertise, that is projection. Dr. Krikorian is not the only trans expert with this conflict of interest. Also, Dr. Krikorian sent Representative Paquette a study written by Dr. Johanna Olsen Kennedy, a California pediatric and adolescent medicine specialist who is married to, wait for it, a trans spouse. Dr. Olsen Kennedy is well known for burying a study on puberty blockers after she realized it didn't produce the results that she actually wanted. Dr. Olsen Kennedy was also infamously caught on video explaining it's not a huge deal if you cut a girl's breasts off because she can go and get breast implants later on if she wants. You know, it's kind of like a Mr. Potato Head. Just take the body parts on, take them off, the whole deal.
But so what we do know is that adolescents actually have the capacity to make a reasoned, logical decision. And here's the other thing about chest surgery. If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
Well, Dr. Krikorian clearly shares Dr. Olsen Kennedy's belief that children can make these kinds of major decisions. In fact, Dr. Krikorian says that children have a stable sense of gender identity at the age of 3.
Developmentally, kids generally have a pretty stable sense of gender identity starting around age 3. They may not tell us unless we ask, but it's generally there around that age. Just developmentally, that's when that comes in. And like I said, with the folks who are really young, with the elementary school age kids, we're not doing any medical interventions. We're just talking with the family. We're making sure that mental health is okay. If it's relevant, then we'll have them talk to a therapist or do some family therapy so they've got a safe space to discuss what they're feeling. And then you allow them to make choices. Often when I'm talking to kids who are thinking about starting these hormones, often they do talk about like, well, I can always, adopt if I decide I want a child, which is true, although it's a little more complicated than just saying, oh, yes, I want to do this. But we make sure that they've considered it. We've made sure that they've had the conversation.
Well, folks, in other words, according to Dr. Krikorian, cross-sex hormones don't sterilize kids, but even if they do, it's okay because these kids can plan to adopt or buy somebody else's sperm one day. That, of course, is insane and dystopian. My kids don't even know what they want for lunch, let alone make a decision about adopting a child of their own in 20 years. Dr. Krikorian does not rely on any objective data or research. Instead, Krikorian explicitly rejects Representative Paquette's studies, including the Cass Review in the UK, the Health and Human Services Report here in the US, both of which show that gender-affirming care is experimental and often dangerous. Here's what that looked like.
Well, why don't you want to get into the HHS report, especially because that focuses on, especially surgeries and other things too. But why not get into the HHS report?
Because I think that it's very politically motivated, and I don't think it's sound science.
Okay, so when we talk about the turban, table, and I guess have you read through the HHS report?
I haven't read it in its entirety. I read sections of it, and I read the executive overview.
Because it relates exactly to your field and what's going on, and so.
Pretty wild to call the HHS report politically motivated and then admit you haven't actually read the report. This is the level of rigor the AMA's handpicked expert is capable of. So here's for the record the HHS report's top-line conclusions. 1, the gender-affirming model of care includes irreversible endocrine and surgical interventions on minors with no physical pathology. 2, these interventions carry risk of significant harms, including infertility, sterility, sexual dysfunction, impaired bone density accrual, adverse cognitive impacts, cardiovascular disease and metabolic disorders, psychiatric disorders, surgical complications, and regret. Meanwhile, systematic reviews of the evidence have revealed deep uncertainty about the purported benefits of these interventions. Meanwhile, again, Dr. Krikorian is the AMA's foremost expert on trans medicine and has no answer to any of this at all. Krikorian parrots the same talking points as Dr. Bobby McCamala, citing a low regret rate, erroneously making false statements about the reversibility of puberty blockers.
The bone density aspects of puberty blocking drugs, how it's off-label FDA, stuff like that. Like, kids are taking these things, and it's like there are ramifications for taking these drugs, right?
Every drug has side effects for sure. Puberty blockers are very reversible. So you stop them, you go through puberty. When you're going through puberty, you have an increase in bone density. So when you're on a puberty blocker, you don't have that increase. But they do catch up as soon as they go through puberty, whether that is by stopping the puberty blocker and going through whatever puberty their body would have ordinarily gone through, or whether that's by starting cross-sex hormones. They do catch back up on bone density.
Now, in the HHS report, a systematic review found that when puberty blockers are followed by cross-sex hormones, which happens over 90% of the time in studies, a critical developmental window for bone density accrual during adolescence could be missed or shortened. The HHS report notes no studies have followed patients into middle age or late adulthood. Krikorian's omission or ignorance of that information is either fraud, a pathetic degree of malice, or gross negligence. At this point, there's no higher authority to whom to speak about this. The AMA's facade has crumbled between their arrogant president, Dr. Bobby McCamala, and their top trans expert, who is literally transgender herself. If any of these people actually cared about the well-being of kids, they would read every single study that suggested these procedures might cause harm cover to cover. They'd come prepared to meetings like this one with detailed arguments for why studies like the Cass Review, the HHS report, and the bombshell of the WPATH files were all wrong. But the AMA, their handpicked expert, they didn't do any of that. Instead, they mocked the side effects, dismissed the data, shut down conversation by writing off all concern as a political intrusion. At this point, the AMA is indistinguishable from other activist left-wing organizations like the Human Rights Campaign or the ACLU. They don't engage in science. They're not interested in protecting patients. They're a lobbying arm for quacks and a mouthpiece for leftists who prey on children. Well, joining us on the line to discuss this unbelievable story is Representative Brad Paquette. He, of course, is a state representative elected to the Michigan State House in 2018, and he was the one who facilitated the conversation between the AMA and Dr. Haim. Representative Paquette, thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, thank you for having me and putting a spotlight on this.
So, first of all, what drove you to facilitate this conversation in the first place?
Well, I'm a teacher, and I got to say that it's an exceptional experience to be able to watch, a young person grow up. You feel old, but when you're young people in ninth grade and middle school become adults, it's quite the thing to see. And so I've been really deliberating on this since about 10 years ago. Had a student in ninth grade who wanted to change her name in class, and so now in an elected office, I've become very convicted because the more you learn about gender theory in particular and how embedded it's become in our sex ed curriculums and in our culture, it becomes very unnerving that young people are being taught that they can be born wrong. And that's contrary to me as a teacher. What I believe is that young people are marvelously made and wonderfully made, and that they need to be able to accept what they've been given and utilize their talents accordingly. And so that's really what has driven me. And then the more that I've pushed on this and the more that I've inquired, the more people said, well, we trust these experts, trust the science. And I was elected in 2019, and 2020 came along, and I raised an eyebrow around the trust the experts phrase. And so I started really digging into this and came to find that a lot of people opposed my bills for no good reason. And a lot of folks said, well, you're not a doctor, Brad, even though I talked to a lot of them. And well, the AMA supports this. And so I went to the AMA and started to talk to their experts and came to find that they have no idea what they're talking about.
So, what was the most shocking point in the conversation? We played a bunch of parts of the conversation that took place between Dr. Haim and Bobby McCamala, who is the head of the AMA. What was the thing that shocked you the most about that conversation?
Yeah, so with the president of the AMA, you think that they would be really knowledgeable on, evidence-based medicine, especially these things that they tout. And Bobby was just completely far removed from any type of real understanding of evidence-based medicine in this regard. And so the way that he demeaned Dr. Haim and the way that he pushed back on him and, put his hand up and did this really, really kind of inflamed my sense there when he just had those talking points that I've heard so many times. I go to all my LGBTQ plus forums. I go and talk to any person I can about this. And he was one of the least informed individuals on this matter, which was just astounding. It was just unreal to see.
So, what do you plan on doing in the state of Michigan? Obviously, you're in the state legislature over there. What do you think the federal government ought to do? What's a corrective to what the AMA has been doing with regard to its propagandizing on behalf of the fraud that is trans, quote unquote, medicine?
Yeah, so I think that as public opinion begins to delve into this is what is most important. This is why I chose to be on oversight committees this term, because I've got a Democrat-controlled Senate and Governor Whitmer, and my bills stopping these things aren't going to move there. The Democrats, my neighbors across the aisle, don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. They won't even let me go into their forums to advocate for my bills. They say, these sayings that I make people uncomfortable, love over hate. Love tells people the truth. And I'm not even able to make my case to my colleagues. Some are sympathetic behind the scenes. So, the federal mandates, the EOs, what Trump is doing is phenomenal. But after Scarametti, this comes down to the states and we have to make our case. And how can we make our case if people won't entertain and talk about these situations in real time? I ask my hospitals, well, how many kids are on puberty blockers? What is the ballpark estimate? They won't even tell me anything. So we've got subpoenas geared up just to gather that information. They'll tell me how many knee replacements that they're doing, but they won't tell me how many kids or even an increase as to how many kids are wanting puberty blockers being prescribed here in the state of Michigan. So we're in a predicament, and it comes down to exposing that these people have no understanding, no grounding in evidence-based medicine. So that's what we're trying to do this term.
Well, that is Representative Brad Paquette. He is in the Michigan State House doing an amazing job on this particular issue, among others. Representative Paquette, thank you so much for the time. And folks, the full video and petition, you can see it all at amaexposed.com. That's amaexposed.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Unless the AMA is held to account before licensing boards, ethics committees, maybe even Congress, they need to testify, the trust of millions of Americans has been lost. Not only has unthinkable harm already been inflicted on a ton of kids, but physicians in this country deserve much better representation than what the AMA is providing. Every shred of institutional trust we have left in this country needs to be cherished and preserved at this point. But when some institutions are shown to be corrupt through and through, as we've seen with the AMA this week, they cannot continue on as they are without some serious reform. Sign the petition over at amaexposed.com so we can stop the left from transing the kids for good and restore America's trust in our healthcare providers. Alrighty, folks, the show is continuing for our members right now. We'll get into everything economic. NVIDIA, after close of market today, is supposed to announce its earnings. What is that going to be? Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.